What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to another whiskey review. Today, we are going to review Remus Repeal Reserve number 7. This, for those that may not be familiar, is a product from MGP. It's one of their own labels. So MGP is a company that used to, and still does, obviously, but provide different barrels of whiskey to a lot of different companies to either blend or to use in their own labeling. And recently, not like recent, but pretty recently, MGP has decided to have their own labels and put their whiskey in their own products. And so Remus is one of those lines that came out from that, and is one of their products. So you have the George Remus, which then has just also changed branding as well. But then you also have the Remus Repeal Reserve. Now, these typically come out once a year, I think is what we've seen so far. And I've gotten a chance to try 2 through 7. And I'm not always a fan of when people say that, you know, oh, this batch was way better way back when, and it's just falling off, or whatever the case is. So regardless of that, I still want to try these batches every single year to see, do I feel that way? Is that really the case? Or do people just kind of play it up in their heads as to what it used to be when maybe it wasn't as good? I don't know. But either way, I like to try it out every year and make an assessment for myself and try to see if I can come up with my own opinion of that. So I've gotten a chance, like I said, to try 2 through 7 up to now. And it's something that I reach for every time. And unfortunately, the price point being about $100, makes you have to really think, is this worth it or not? So I feel like we're kind of in that range with whiskey right now. Booker's, some of the barrel bourbon stuff, the Remus stuff. I mean, a lot of whiskeys right now are aiming at that $80 to $100 range, or even above $100. So in my opinion, that has to be something that brings quality. You can't just bottle it and just release it every year and not really put much thought into it. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of thought that goes into it, but what I'm basically saying is that that has to be worth it. So we're going to figure out today, is it worth it? At least to me. You try it on your own. So for those, again, not as familiar, this bottle is basically a blend, and what they do is they blend different bourbons. This particular one is a blend of a 2007 bourbon, 2013, 2014, another 2013, and another 2014. And then there's different, mash bills as well that's located on the label, and take a look at that for yourself. But it is 100 proof, so I don't expect this to be too hot or anything like that. I think that this should be approachable just looking at the proof. Again, I kind of know what to expect going into this because I've had other releases, but each year can be different. Any batch product like that, whether it's something like a Booker's where they're releasing it 4 times a year, or Elijah Craig barrel proof, Larceny barrel proof, Remus, we see this often now. So whether it's once a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, whatever the case is, there can be variation between batch to batch. That's just kind of the name of the game. So let's see how they did with this particular one. On the nose, for me, I get like, there's a smoky element to it. It's almost like the barrel char itself. There's some smoky tobacco, but there's also like a citrus element. And I would think that this is more of like lemon citrus. And I'm kind of splitting hairs at this point, but there's definitely some type of lemon that's pulling me in a certain direction. But there's definitely this smokiness. And I don't mean smoky like scotch or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's this faint, and I'm assuming it's from the char, from the barrel, but sometimes tobacco notes can come up in whiskey as well. So it's kind of like that. Like it's the faint smell of some type of smokiness, but not smoked or peated or anything like that. I'm not trying to turn anybody off to it immediately if that's not your thing. So let's try it out. Cheers. So I think the barrel char definitely comes through on the palate as well. That smokiness, that tobacco, that even it's like faint leather. That's still, it all translates. It's coming from the nose to the palate. There's no real surprise here. I think the thing that kind of does surprise me is it's a little sweeter than I thought it might be based on the nose. So there's brown sugar. There's almost like a floral element to this as well. It's complex without being overly complex, if that makes sense. There's enough complexity there, but not enough that the nose is one thing, the palate is another, the finish is another. We're kind of still staying in the same lane. This is very much your what I think people would think of when they think of MGP or when they think of a Kentucky bourbon style. I think that this is just kind of that, what MGP is kind of known for, that taste profile. You're not going to go, you know, into left field with it. I think it's going to be pretty straight down the plate type of thing. So it's, the flavors there are complex enough, meaning that the smokiness, the sweetness, the floral, they're all there. I think what I would like to see is more depth of flavor. I would love for there to be more concentrated flavors and more just, yeah, depth. I mean, that's probably the best word for it. I wish that there was a little bit more like in there. And I don't know if the proof is kind of getting away from that. And that's where it's always tough, because these are always bottled at 100 proof, but at a higher proof, would it be too smoky, or do we lose some of that flavor by dropping it down to 100? I don't know. I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? But I think, you know, overall, still a good whiskey. But I think when you go into that price point, I think all of a sudden now we have to start figuring out, is this truly worth it? And, you know, so let's see. Let's finish this one off. Cheers. So still those same flavors. Again, not evolving. What I got initially is still what I'm getting. There's a little bit more of a creaminess on the texture, a little bit of that creamy vanilla that I'm starting to get. There's black pepper on the finish, and I would say it's like a medium to long finish. So again, good whiskey for sure. At a $100 price point, is it worth it? For me, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no only because of what is available at a lower price point. The two that come to mind immediately are Old Forester 1920 and Wild Turkey Rare Breed. And I think with both of those being in the $50 to $60 range, it's so hard to recommend a $100 bottle that doesn't bring more to the plate, more to the table than what they do. And I think, again, this on its own is a very good whiskey. I think if you were to buy this as a special gift for somebody, or even treat yourself to a nice bottle, I don't think anybody would be mad at it. I just don't think that this justifies going up, paying another $40 or something like that. I think even barrel bourbon lately has started to have some of their bottles in the anywhere between $80, $100 range. So even saving $20, I think you still put yourself in a particular range where there's still a little bit out there that's, you know, I think maybe going to provide a better experience, at least depending on what that person's looking for. I also think when you go in that price range, you have to check out what else is around that, even going higher. So when I look at some of the Discovery series from Bardstown, you know, there's just certain whiskeys that you're starting to play that game now of your competition. And so, you know, that's just my own opinion. I think that the price starts to mess this one up a little bit. I think if this were a $60 bottle, I think it'd be fantastic, but it's not. It's 100. And so at 100, I have to now have a whole different experience. And I'm probably going to say this on a lot of reviews, but the way I think about it is like steak. If I go to Outback Steakhouse and I get a steak, I pay $20 or $15 or whatever a steak is, then I'm kind of expecting a certain level of experience because I'm paying $20 for this steak. There's kind of that give and take. But when I go to a fancy steakhouse, or Ruth Chris, or here locally, St. Elmo's, but if I go to something, one of those higher end steakhouses, and my meal now jumps from a $20 steak to a $100 steak, that has to be a whole different experience. That has to provide, it has to be more tender. It has to be, provide more flavor. It has to have all these components of it in order to justify that, me spending the difference in that money. And I have to be able to see that as a consumer. I don't necessarily see that here as a consumer. So that's, again, it itself as a whiskey is not bad at all. But I think that it's just something that price-wise, I think you start to price yourself out. So with all that being said, I'm going to rate this whiskey a 90 out of 100. It still is a really good whiskey. I don't want to say anybody wouldn't like it. There are definitely people that I know that either have been a little bit disappointed by the Remus Repeal series, or maybe tried it for the first time and just not their jam. So I do think there's people out there that may not necessarily like it. But, you know, it's, again, I don't want to keep harping on it, but at $100 price point, if you don't like it, I don't know that you want to just throw it in a cocktail. I mean, that's not necessarily why you spend that type of money. So this might be a situation where you try before you buy. I think that you can still, I've still seen these bottles around, so I think it's still available for the most part. But even when I found this one, it's not the easiest to find. But, you know, again, I think if somebody were to get this as a gift or something like that, I don't know that anybody would be upset about it. But there's a few others out there that you can spend a little bit less money on, or maybe even try 2 different bottles and get that for somebody or get that for yourself. And I think you'd be a little bit more happy with what your options are versus spending the money on this one, which is probably conflicting. It sounds like I don't necessarily like it, but again, it's not about the whiskey. It's not that I don't like the whiskey. It's just the price. I think at that price, I have to have an experience, and I don't get what I'm necessarily looking for here. I do wonder, I'm not the best person to pair cigars with whiskey, but with that smokiness, that element there, I'd be curious for anybody that is a cigar smoker, how that may pair, if they've ever tried that. That's something that I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about for this particular whiskey, just because it does kind of have that barrel char, that smoky tobacco element to it. So either way, like I said, 90 out of 100 is what I'm rating it. Still a solid whiskey for sure out of MGP. I just expect a little bit more coming out of your limited edition price at that price point. So it is what it is. It's still a very good whiskey. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next review. Cheers.